Please don't tell Uncle Ray. Please. An 8-year-old girl with grease burns on her arms begged through tears, standing on a step stool behind a hot grill at 1 in the morning. She'd been cooking alone for 3 weeks. No one knew. No one came. Until 9 Hell's Angels bikers walked through that door looking for coffee and found something that dropped every one of them silent. Tiny hands flipping burgers, a cash register she counted on her fingers, and a secret so heavy it would break this entire city wide open. But what these men did next, no one satisfying predicted. Before we begin, drop your city name in the comments so we can see how far this story reaches. And stay with us to the very end. Subscribe now, because this one will stay with you long after it's over. The rumble of 9 Harley-Davidsons cut through the dead silence of Route 18 like rolling thunder at 1 in the morning. Gunnar Hayes rode point, the way he'd been riding for 26 years, his scarred jaw set against the cold Ohio wind, his brown hair streaked with gray whipping beneath a half-helmet that had saved his life more times than he cared to count. At 53, the president of the Hells Angels Ohio chapter carried himself with the kind of authority that didn't need to announce itself. People felt it when he walked into a room. They felt it more when he didn't say a word. Behind him, Bull Morgan's custom road king groaned under 310 pounds of former Army muscle. Styx Callahan rode third, thin as a rail, brown hair buzzed short, the kind of man you'd never look at twice unless you noticed the way his eyes calculated everything around him like a computer running numbers, even in his sleep. They'd been riding since sundown, a routine run between Ridgewood and Columbus, the kind of ride that cleared heads and reminded men why they'd chosen this life in the first place. 9 bikes, 9 brothers, and one road that was about to change everything. Gunnar spotted the neon sign first, Dawson's Diner. Half the letters were burned out, so it read DWOSDNR in a sickly orange flicker. He'd eaten there 100 times over the past 15 years. Good coffee, better food, and a man behind the counter who never once looked at a leather vest and saw trouble. Pull in, Gunnar signaled, and the formation banked right into the gravel lot. Something was wrong. He felt it before he saw it. The diner was open, lights on, door unlocked, but through the window the person behind the counter wasn't Ryan Dawson. The person behind the counter barely cleared the top of the grill. Gunnar killed his engine. Bull pulled alongside him, his massive frame making the bike look like a toy. "That a kid in there?" Bull asked. Gunnar didn't answer. He was already walking toward the door. The bell above the entrance jingled as he pushed through. The smell hit him first. Burnt grease, old coffee, and something else underneath it all. Something that smelled like exhaustion, like desperation soaked into the walls. 2 truck drivers sat in a corner booth, heads down over plates of eggs and toast. They didn't look up, didn't seem to notice or care that their food had been cooked by a child. And there she was. Lily Dawson stood on a wooden step stool behind the grill, a baseball cap 3 sizes too big pulled down over blonde hair that hadn't been washed in days. She wore her father's apron, wrapped around her body twice, and still dragging the floor. Her small hands gripped a spatula, flipping a burger with the kind of practiced motion that said she'd been doing this a lot longer than any child should. But it was her arms that stopped Gunnar cold. Red marks dotted her forearms, grease burns, some fresh, some starting to scar over. This wasn't her first night. "Lily?" Gunnar said, keeping his voice low, careful, like approaching a wounded animal. The girl spun around so fast she nearly fell off the stool. Her blue eyes went wide, not just surprised, terrified, caught. "Mr. Gunnar," her voice came out like a whisper squeezed through a closing fist. We're open. We're still open. Can I get you some coffee?" 8 years old, and she was trying to take his order. Gunnar moved closer, slow, keeping his hands visible. Behind him, Bull filled the doorway, and the 2 truckers finally looked up, suddenly very aware that the restaurant had changed. "Where's your daddy, sweetheart?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Lily's face did something that broke Gunner's chest wide open. It crumbled, rebuilt itself, and crumbled again, all in the span of 2 seconds. She was fighting to hold together a lie that was too heavy for her small shoulders. "He's in the back," she said quickly, too quickly. "He's just resting. He told me to watch the front." Bull didn't wait for permission. He walked past the counter, through the kitchen, and into the back room. Gunner watched the big man disappear behind a curtain, and he watched Lily's face as she tracked Bull's movement with a kind of panic that only comes from knowing your secret is about to die. 10 seconds of silence. 20. Bull came back through the curtain. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at Gunner, and in 20 years of brotherhood, Gunner had learned to read that face like a book. Nobody was back there, just a cot with wrinkled sheets, pill bottles scattered on a milk crate, a photograph of a woman taped to the wall. Lily's mother, Gunner realized, the one who died 4 years ago. "Lily," Gunner said again, and this time his voice carried something different. Not a question, an opening, a door she could walk through if she chose to. "He's not here, is he?" The spatula slipped from her hand and clattered against the grill. She didn't pick it up. She stood there on that step stool, 8 years old, grease-burned, exhausted, and the dam broke. "Daddy's in the hospital," she said, and the words came out like they'd been trapped inside her for weeks, fighting to get free. "He fell 3 weeks ago and they took him away in an ambulance, and Uncle Ray said he's real sick, and his back is broken from the accident, and the doctors say he needs surgery, but we don't got the money, and if I don't keep the diner open, the truck drivers won't come, and if the truck drivers don't come, we can't pay for nothing, and Daddy said this diner is all we got, Mr. Gunner. It's all we got." She was crying now, tears cutting clean lines through the grease on her cheeks. Her small body shook on that step stool, and Gunner felt something twist inside him that he hadn't felt in years. Rage. Not at the child, not at fate, at a world that could put this weight on a little girl's shoulders and look the other way. "How long?" he asked quietly. "How long have you been doing this?" "Every night," Lily whispered. 3 weeks. Uncle Ray drops me off after school. He thinks I sleep in the back, but after he leaves, I open the diner. The truck drivers come between midnight and 5. I cook what I know how to cook. Eggs, burgers, toast, coffee. "You've been here alone? Every night for 3 weeks?" She nodded, wiping her nose on the back of her hand. "I count the money real careful. I put it in the box under the register. Daddy showed me where before he got sick." Bull made a sound behind Gunner, a low, rumbling exhale that was this giant man's version of heartbreak. Gunner knelt down. His knees cracked against the floor, his scarred face level with hers. He looked into those blue eyes, eyes that should have been worried about homework and cartoons, not health inspections and medical bills. And he asked the question that he already knew the answer to. "Why didn't you tell somebody, Lily? Your uncle? A teacher? Anybody?" "Because they'll take me away." Her voice dropped to something barely audible. "Uncle Ray said if people find out Daddy can't take care of me, the government people will come. And if the government people come, they'll put me somewhere else. And if I'm somewhere else, who's going to keep Daddy's diner alive? Who's going to make sure he has something to come home to?" Gunner closed his eyes. He'd faced down rivals who wanted him dead. He'd walked through situations that should have killed him twice over. But nothing in his 53 years of hard living had prepared him for the quiet courage of an 8-year-old girl standing on a step stool, burning her hands every night to keep her dying father's dream alive because she was too scared to ask for help. "Sticks," Gunner called without turning around. "Get in here, Sticks." Callahan appeared in the doorway, his sharp eyes already scanning, already reading the situation. "Find the books, every receipt, every bill, every piece of paper in that office. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with." "On it." Sticks disappeared into the back. Bull. "Yeah, boss. Call Doc Wheeler. Tell him I need a full status on a patient named Ryan Dawson at Ridgewood General. Use whatever channel gets you answers tonight. Done. Bull already had his phone out, stepping outside where the signal was stronger. Lily watched these men move with the coordinated precision of soldiers, her tears still wet on her cheeks, but her eyes now holding something new. Confusion. And underneath the confusion, a tiny spark of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in 3 weeks. Hope. "Mr. Gunner, what are you doing?" Gunner stood, his knees protesting, and he did something that surprised even the truck drivers watching from their booth. He reached down and gently, carefully, lifted Lily off that step stool and set her down on the counter. Eye level. Equal. "Your daddy ever talked to you about us?" Gunner asked. "About why he always served us when other places wouldn't?" Lily nodded slowly. "He said you're just people. He said everybody deserves a hot meal and somebody who don't look at them mean. Your daddy spent 15 years feeding us, fixing our bikes at his buddy's shop, treating us like human beings when this whole town treated us like criminals. You know how many diners between here and Columbus won't even let us through the door?" Lily shook her head. "All of them. Every single one. Except this one. Except your daddy's place." Gunner placed his hand on the counter beside her, not touching her, just close enough so she could feel that she wasn't alone. "So here's what's going to happen, Lily. My family is going to take care of your family, because that's what your daddy did for us, and it's time we paid it back with interest." "But I can't pay you," Lily said, her practical 8-year-old mind already jumping ahead. "The money box only has $412. I counted yesterday." Gunner almost smiled. Almost. "Sweetheart, what I'm talking about doesn't have a price tag." The kitchen door swung open, and Sticks walked back in carrying a shoebox overflowing with papers. His face was the color of old chalk. "Gunner." Sticks' voice was flat, the way it got when the numbers told a story nobody wanted to hear. "We need to talk. Now." He spread the papers on the nearest table. Past due notices stacked on top of past due notices. Medical bills with numbers that made Gunner's jaw tighten. A mortgage notice marked "Final Warning" in red letters that screamed from the page. "How bad?" Gunner asked. $47,000 in medical debt, 3 months behind on the building mortgage. Electric bill 2 months overdue. They haven't shut it off yet because the account's been here so long. Health department sent an inspection notice 6 weeks ago. If they fail, the city shuts them down. That's not the worst part, Sticks continued, lowering his voice so Lily couldn't hear. There's a letter in here from the mayor's office. The city's looking at condemning the building, something about code violations and commercial development. Gunner's eyes went cold. Not angry, worse than angry, focused. They're trying to take her father's building while he's in a hospital bed? Looks that way. Gunner looked back at Lily, who sat on the counter watching them with those 2 old eyes. She'd stopped crying. She was studying them the way her father probably studied an engine, trying to figure out what was broken and how to fix it. "Lily," Gunner said, walking back to her, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Can you do that?" She nodded. "Has anybody from the city come by? Anybody in a suit talking about the building?" Lily's face changed. Fear slid across it like a shadow. "A man came last week. He had a clipboard. He walked around outside and wrote things down. He tried to come in, but I hid. I turned off the lights and hid behind the counter until he left." "Did he say his name?" "He left a card on the door. I put it in the box." Sticks rifled through the shoebox and pulled out a business card. He read it and handed it to Gunner without a word. "Frank Greer, mayor of Ridgewood." "Son of a bitch," Gunner said quietly. Bull came back inside, ducking through the doorway. "Got through to the hospital. Ryan Dawson's in stable condition, but it's not good. Crushed vertebrae from a construction accident 8 months back. Nerve damage getting worse. Doctors say he needs specialized spinal surgery at a facility in Cleveland. Without it, he may never walk again." "How long does he have before the window closes?" They're talking weeks, not months. The nerve damage is progressive. Lily heard that part. What does progressive mean? Every man in the room felt the weight of that question. Bull crouched down to her level, his massive frame folding in on itself. It means your daddy needs that surgery soon, little bit, and we're going to make sure he gets it. You promise? Bull looked at Gunnar. Gunnar looked at Styx. And in that diner, at 2:30 in the morning, surrounded by cold coffee and burnt grease, and the desperate courage of an 8-year-old girl, a silent agreement passed between three men who'd built their lives on one principle. When family calls, you answer. I promise, Bull said. Gunnar pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in over a year. It rang 4 times before a groggy voice answered. It's Gunnar. I'm calling in every marker, every favor, everything we're owed. I need men in Ridgewood by sunrise. Bring tools, bring trucks, and tell every chapter between here and Pennsylvania that the Ohio Angels just declared a family emergency. He paused. No, not our blood. Better, the kind of family that earns it. He hung up and looked at Lily. When's the last time you ate something, sweetheart? And I don't mean what you cooked for somebody else. Lily thought about it, really thought. I had a granola bar at school, for lunch. Bull's hands clenched into fists the size of bowling balls. Not in violence, in grief. That's 12 hours ago, Styx said quietly. Gunnar walked behind the counter, rolled up his sleeves and turned on the second burner. Bull, you were Army. Tell me you remember how to make scrambled eggs. Boss, I can make eggs that would make a general cry. Then get back here and feed this child. Styx, I need you on the phone with every lawyer in our network. Find out what it takes to fight a condemnation order in Ohio. Already thinking it through. Styx pulled out his laptop. Lily watched Gunnar move through her father's kitchen like he belonged there. Mr. Gunnar? Yeah, sweetheart? Are you really going to help my daddy? Gunnar cracked an egg with one hand, the way he'd seen Ryan do it 100 times. Lily, your daddy fed me the first meal I ate as a free man when I got out of a bad situation 12 years ago. I walked into this diner with nothing but my vest and an empty stomach. Your daddy didn't ask questions, didn't judge, just put a plate in front of me and said, Eat, brother, you look hungry. He cracked another egg. I never forgot that. Some of us never forget kindness because we know how rare it is. The egg sizzled on the grill. Bull moved in beside Gunnar with the easy coordination of men used to working together in tight spaces. He pulled bread from the rack, started a fresh pot of coffee, and found butter in the walk-in that was still good. Lily, Bull said while he worked, your daddy keep any jam around here? Strawberry, maybe? Top shelf, behind the peanut butter. He hides it because it's my favorite, and he says I eat too much of it. Bull reached up and pulled down a half-empty jar of strawberry jam. He held it up to the light, studied it like a precious artifact. Man hides the good jam for his little girl. That tells you everything you need to know about a person. 5 minutes later, Lily sat in her usual booth, the one by the window with the photograph of her mother taped to the wall above it, eating scrambled eggs, buttered toast with strawberry jam, and drinking a glass of milk that Bull had found in the back. She ate with the kind of focused intensity that only comes from real hunger, the kind a child tries to hide because she's learned that admitting need is dangerous. Gunnar sat across from her, a cup of coffee in his hands, watching her eat. The two truckers had left sometime during the conversation, paying their bill by leaving cash on the table. They'd left more than the food cost. Maybe they'd heard enough to understand what was happening. Mr. Gunnar, Lily said between bites of toast. Yeah? My daddy's going to be mad when he finds out I was working at night. Probably. He's going to be real mad. Probably that too. But he'd be madder if I let the diner close, right? Gunnar set down his coffee. Lily, let me tell you something about dads. Your daddy's not going to be mad at you. He's going to be mad at himself. Because every father in the world believes it's his job to protect his children. And when he can't do that, the anger isn't directed at the kid. It's directed inward, at himself. Lily stopped chewing. How do you know that? Because I had a daughter once, long time ago, and I know what it feels like when you can't be there for your kid. It was more than Gunnar had shared with anyone in years. Bull and Sticks both heard it, and neither man spoke. Some truths were sacred. Lily put down her toast. What happened to your daughter? She grew up, lives in Michigan now. We don't talk much. That's my fault, not hers. Maybe you should call her. Gunnar looked at this 8-year-old girl, grease under her fingernails, burns on her arms, jam on her chin, giving him life advice at 2:30 in the morning. And for the first time in months, something loosened in his chest. Maybe I should. The phone rang. Sticks grabbed it. He listened for 3 minutes without speaking, writing notes on a napkin. When he hung up, his face carried information that was going to change the direction of everything. That was our guy at the county recorder's office. Couldn't sleep, checked his files when I called. And Mayor Greer's been in talks with a development company out of Columbus. They want to buy 6 properties along Main Street to build a strip mall and apartment complex. Dawson's Diner is sitting on the most valuable lot in the package. Without it, the whole deal falls apart. Gunnar's fingers tightened around his coffee cup. So Greer's not condemning the building because it's unsafe. He's condemning it because he wants the land. Gets worse. My guy says there's a kickback arrangement. Greer stands to personally profit if the development goes through. How much? Enough to make a small-town mayor very motivated to push a sick man's daughter out of her family's home. Lily didn't understand all the words, but she understood tone. She understood the cold fury that settled across Gunnar's features, like ice forming on a winter lake. The man with the clipboard, Lily said quietly, is he trying to take Daddy's diner? Gunnar looked at her. This child, who'd been fighting alone for 3 weeks, who'd burned her hands and skipped meals, and worked through the night to save her father's legacy, now faced one more enemy she couldn't see and couldn't fight. He's trying, Gunnar said, but he doesn't know what he's up against. What's he up against? Gunnar finished his coffee and set the cup down with a quiet finality that his brothers recognized as the sound of a decision being made. Us. Outside, the first gray light of dawn crept across the parking lot of Dawson's Diner. Inside, an 8-year-old girl with burned hands and strawberry jam on her chin fell asleep in a booth, her head resting against the wall beneath her mother's photograph, while 3 of the toughest men in Ohio stood guard over her like sentinels. By 5:30, the distant rumble of approaching motorcycles began to build on the horizon. Not 9 this time, not 12. Gunnar had called in the full weight of Brotherhood, and Brotherhood was answering. Bull covered Lily with his leather jacket, the one with the patches she used to trace with her fingers when she was a toddler sitting on her father's counter. He looked at Gunnar. How many confirmed? 40 by noon, more coming from Indiana and Pennsylvania by tonight. And the mayor? Gunnar watched the dawn light touch the broken neon sign. DWOSDNR. A dying sign for a dying business in a town that had forgotten what it meant to take care of its own. The mayor thinks he's dealing with a sick man and a little girl with nobody in her corner. Gunnar zipped his jacket and walked toward the door. He's about to find out how wrong he is. Lily shifted in her sleep, one small hand reaching out across the empty booth, like she was searching for someone who wasn't there. The photograph of her mother watched from the wall above, a blonde woman with Lily's same blue eyes, smiling at a future she'd never see. And somewhere in Ridgewood General, 3 miles away, Ryan Dawson lay in a hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, not knowing that his 8-year-old daughter had just accidentally ignited something that would either save his family or burn this town to the ground. The motorcycles were getting closer. By 9 that morning, 43 motorcycles lined the parking lot of Dawson's Diner like an army assembling for war. Men in leather vests bearing Hell's Angels patches from Ohio, Indiana, and western Pennsylvania stood in clusters, smoking cigarettes and speaking in low voices. They'd ridden through the night on one phone call. One word from Gunnar Hayes. Family emergency. Lily woke to the sound of boots on tile and the smell of fresh coffee that was better than anything she'd ever made. She sat up in the booth, Bull's leather jacket sliding off her shoulders, and blinked at the sight of her father's diner, filled with more people than she'd ever seen inside it. "Morning, little bit," Bull said from behind the counter. He'd taken over the kitchen like he'd been born there, a white towel thrown over his shoulder, 3 burners going at once. "Hungry? You're cooking?" Lily rubbed her eyes. "In Daddy's kitchen?" "Your daddy's kitchen is about to become the busiest restaurant in Ridgewood. Hope you don't mind me borrowing his spatula." Lily climbed out of the booth and walked behind the counter with the confidence of a child who'd spent her whole life in this space. She peered into the kitchen and stopped. Every surface was clean. The grill gleamed. The walk-in had been reorganized. Supplies she hadn't seen in months, fresh produce, eggs by the flat, real butter, filled the shelves. "Where did all this food come from?" "Brothers brought it," Bull said, cracking eggs with both hands simultaneously. "You don't show up to a family emergency empty-handed." Gunnar came through the front door, phone pressed to his ear, his face carrying the hard focus that his crew recognized as battle mode. He held up one finger to Lily, "Give me a minute," and continued his conversation in a voice too low for her to hear. Sticks sat in the corner booth that had become his command center, laptop open, papers spread across the table, 3 phones charging beside him. He'd been awake all night, and it showed, but his eyes were sharp and his pen moved across a yellow legal pad with the speed of a man who'd found his purpose. "Sticks?" Lily approached carefully. "What are you doing?" "Saving your daddy's business," he said without looking up. "You know what a forensic audit is?" "No, it means I'm reading every piece of paper your daddy ever signed to make sure nobody cheated him. And Lily, somebody cheated him." Lily's stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" Sticks finally looked up. His thin face carried a controlled anger that he kept behind his teeth. "Your daddy's mortgage. The interest rate got changed 18 months ago. Somebody at the bank bumped it up without proper notification. That's why the payments jumped. That's why he started falling behind." "Is that allowed?" "Not even close." Gunnar finished his call and walked over. "What do we have?" The mortgage company jacked Ryan's rate right around the time his medical bills started piling up. Could be coincidence. Could be somebody at the bank tipped off somebody at City Hall that the Dawson property was about to go into default. Gunnar's jaw tightened. Greer. Can't prove it yet, but the timing stinks. Lily looked between the 2 men. "The clipboard man did this to Daddy?" Gunnar crouched to her level. "Lily, we're going to figure out exactly what happened, but I need you to do something for me today." "What?" "I need you to be a kid. Go to school. Do your homework. Let us handle the grown-up stuff." "But," "No buts. Your daddy would want you in school, and you know it." Lily's chin set with the same stubborn line Gunnar had seen on Ryan Dawson's face 100 times. "I'll go to school, but I'm coming back right after. And you have to promise to tell me everything. No lying, no pretending it's fine when it's not. Daddy used to do that, and look what happened." Bull let out a low whistle from the kitchen. "She's got you there, boss." Gunnar almost smiled. "Deal. Full honesty. Now eat your breakfast." Uncle Ray's pickup truck skidded into the parking lot at 9:15, and the man who jumped out looked like he hadn't slept in days. Ray Dawson was 45, with the same blonde hair as his brother and niece, but stress had carved lines into his face that added 10 years. He stormed through the front door and stopped dead. 40 bikers, his niece eating pancakes, a stranger cooking in his brother's kitchen. What in God's name is happening here? "Uncle Ray!" Lily jumped from her stool. Ray grabbed her shoulders, his eyes scanning her face, her arms. He saw the burns. His expression crumbled. "Lily, those marks on your arms. How long?" "She's been running this diner alone for 3 weeks," Gunnar said from the corner. No accusation in his voice, just fact. "Every night, after you dropped her off, Ray's face went white, then red. He rounded on Gunnar with fists clenched. "And who the hell are you to tell me about my niece? You think I don't know who you people are? You think I'm going to stand here while a bunch of—" "Uncle Ray, stop." Lily grabbed his arm with both hands. "They helped me. Mister, Gunnar found me last night, and they fed me, and they're trying to help Daddy." "Help? These people don't help, they—" "Where were you at 1 in the morning?" Lily's voice cracked like a whip, and the diner went silent. Every biker, every sound, gone. Just an 8-year-old girl staring up at her uncle with tears building behind a fury she'd been holding back for weeks. "I was there every night, Uncle Ray. Every single night. My hands burned and my back hurt and I was scared, and I kept waiting for somebody to come. Somebody to notice. You dropped me off and drove away, and I watched your taillights go, and then I opened the diner because somebody had to." Ray's knees buckled. He caught himself on the counter, one hand pressed flat against the surface like the world had tilted. "Lily, I didn't know. God, I didn't know. Because you didn't look." The words landed like a blade. Quiet, clean, devastating. Bull set down his spatula and walked out of the kitchen. He put one massive hand on Ray's shoulder, not in threat, but in the kind of steadiness that said, "I've been where you are. Nobody's blaming you, brother. Kid's been running a covert operation that would impress special forces. But she's done carrying this alone. Question is, are you in or are you out?" Ray looked at Bull's hand on his shoulder, looked at Lily's burned arms, looked at the diner full of strangers who'd shown up for his family when he hadn't even known his family needed showing up for. "I'm in," he whispered. "God help me, I'm in." "Good," Gunnar stood, "because we've got a bigger problem than medical bills. Sticks, show him." Sticks laid out the paperwork on the table, the mortgage documents, the rate change, the condemnation notice, the mayor's business card. Ray read through it all with the slow, horrified comprehension of a man watching a car accident in slow motion. "Greer's trying to steal the diner?" "Greer's trying to steal the entire block," Sticks corrected. "Ryan's property is the linchpin. Without it, his development deal collapses. With Ryan in the hospital and the business failing, Greer figured it was easy pickings." "That bastard," Ray's voice shook. "He stood in church last Sunday talking about community values. Community values, and he's trying to take a dying man's business." "Dying man's daughter's business," Lily corrected quietly. "Daddy's going to get better." Every man in that room heard the fierce certainty in her voice, and not one of them had the heart to speak the doubt that lingered in the air. Gunnar's phone buzzed. He read the message and his entire posture changed. Stiff, alert, the way a man stands when trouble stops being theoretical and becomes real. "Sticks, we've got visitors. Black sedan just turned onto Main Street. County plates." "CPS?" "That'd be my guess." Lily heard the 3 letters, and her face drained of color. "No, no, no, no. Uncle Ray, don't let them take me. Please don't let them." Ray scooped her up, held her against his chest. "Nobody's taking you anywhere, baby." "Lily, listen to me." Gunnar moved fast, kneeling in front of her. "These people are going to ask questions. That's their job. All you have to do is tell the truth. Can you do that?" "The truth is I was alone. The truth is you were brave. The truth is your family is here now. Every person in this building is your family, and nobody is breaking this family apart." The front door opened. A woman in a gray blazer stepped inside, clipboard in hand, her eyes sweeping across the diner full of leather-clad bikers, with the trained neutrality of someone who'd walked into worse situations. Behind her, a younger man in a county ID badge carried a camera. "I'm looking for the guardian of Lily Dawson," the woman said. "My name is Sandra Mitchell, Richland County Child Protective Services." Ray set Lily down and stepped forward. "I'm Ray Dawson, her uncle, temporary guardian while my brother's in the hospital." Sandra Mitchell's eyes moved from Ray to Lily to the room full of Hell's Angels. Her expression didn't change, but Gunnar caught the slight tightening around her mouth. She was calculating, assessing. Mr. Dawson, we received a report that a minor child was found working unsupervised in a commercial kitchen during overnight hours. Can you tell me about that? I can tell you, Lily said before Ray could speak. She stepped forward, her small frame somehow carrying authority that filled the room. I did it, every night for 3 weeks. My uncle didn't know. My daddy didn't know. I snuck out after Uncle Ray went to sleep, and I opened the diner because we needed the money for Daddy's surgery. Sandra wrote quickly. And these men? They found me last night. They fed me. They're helping fix our diner so Daddy has something to come home to. Sandra looked at Gunnar. And you are? Gunnar Hayes, family friend. Family friend, Sandra's pen paused. Mr. Hayes, are you aware that an 8-year-old child operating commercial cooking equipment unsupervised constitutes a serious safety concern? Ma'am, I'm aware that an 8-year-old shouldn't have to. That's why we're here. Sandra studied him for a long moment. Whatever she saw made her write something on her clipboard, and Gunnar couldn't tell if that was good or bad. I'll need to speak with Lily privately, and with you, Mr. Dawson, separately. Ray nodded, his hand finding Lily's shoulder. Whatever you need. And I'll need to inspect the living conditions. Where has Lily been sleeping? With me, Ray said. My apartment is 3 blocks from here. She has her own room. I can show you. Sandra turned to Lily. Sweetheart, I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to make sure you're safe. Do you understand? Lily looked up at this stranger with a clipboard and the power to destroy everything. I understand that when I was alone and scared, you didn't come. They did. She pointed at the bikers surrounding her. So you tell me who's keeping me safe. Sandra Mitchell blinked. In 12 years of Child Protective Services, she'd never been dressed down by an 8-year-old. Gunnar watched them walk to the back office, Sandra, Lily, and Ray, and felt something he rarely allowed himself to feel. Uncertainty. The law didn't care about brotherhood or good intentions. The law cared about paperwork and procedures and documentation. And on paper, this situation looked bad. A hospitalized father, a negligent uncle, a child laborer, and a motorcycle gang hovering around her like a leather-wrapped security detail. Boss, Bull appeared at his side. What's the play? We need a lawyer, a real one. Not somebody from our network. Somebody clean, somebody the court respects. I know someone, Stick said from his booth. Martha Collins, the retired nurse. Her daughter's a family law attorney in Mansfield, handles custody cases. Get her on the phone. Today. Now. The morning moved fast after that. Gunnar split his forces with military precision. One team started on the diner. Deep cleaning, equipment repairs, everything needed to pass a health inspection that could come any day. A second team worked the phones, reaching out to every contact and resource the Angels had built over decades of operating outside the law, but always inside a code. Bull ran the kitchen, serving breakfast and lunch to a stream of customers who'd heard through the small-town grapevine that something unprecedented was happening at Dawson's Diner. Townspeople who'd crossed the street to avoid bikers now stood in line for coffee, curiosity overcoming prejudice 1 cup at a time. And at 11:40 in the morning, Martha Collins walked through the front door, 72 years old, white hair pulled back in a bun, carrying a casserole dish in one hand and her cell phone in the other. She'd been a diner regular for 20 years, and she'd watched Ryan Dawson grow from a nervous young father into a pillar of the community. Gunnar Hayes, she said, setting the casserole on the counter. I hear you've taken over my favorite restaurant. Temporary arrangement, ma'am. Don't ma'am me. I changed your stitches when you crashed your bike on Route 30 in 2014. I think we're past formalities. She looked around the diner with sharp eyes. Where's Lily? Back office. CPS is interviewing her. Martha's expression hardened. Who called them? Don't know yet. I do. Martha pulled out her phone. Frank Greer's assistant posted on the community Facebook page this morning. Concerned citizens report child endangerment at local business. It went up at 7 a.m., 2 hours before CPS showed up. Gunnar felt the rage build and held it behind his teeth. He called CPS to get Lily removed, so there's nobody left to fight the condemnation. That's exactly what he did. And it gets worse. My daughter, she's the lawyer, Lindsay Collins. She made some calls this morning after I told her what was happening. The development company behind Greer's deal, they've already started preliminary work on building permits. They're not waiting for the condemnation to go through. They're acting like it's already done. Stix looked up from his laptop. Because Greer told them it was. He never expected anyone to fight back. Well, Martha said, smoothing her blouse with the calm authority of a woman who'd spent 50 years managing emergencies. He expected wrong. The back office door opened. Sandra Mitchell came out first, followed by Lillian Ray. Sandra's face carried the careful neutrality of someone still assembling her conclusions. Mr. Dawson, I'll need to visit your apartment this afternoon. I'd also like to speak with Lily's school tomorrow morning. Her teachers may have observations about her recent behavior. Of course, Ray said. His voice had steadied, anchored by the morning's revelations into something harder than guilt, something closer to purpose. Sandra paused at the door. She looked back at the room, at the bikers cleaning grills and organizing supplies, at Martha Collins already cutting her casserole into portions for the lunch crowd, at Lily standing between her uncle and Gunnar with a posture that said, "Try to move me." "I'll be filing my preliminary report by Friday," Sandra said. "I want to be clear, my concern is Lily's safety, nothing else. If this environment is stable and appropriate, my report will reflect that." She left. The diner exhaled. "Friday," Ray said. "That gives us 4 days." 4 days to make this place bulletproof, Gunnar agreed. "Stix, where are we on the health inspection?" "I've got 8 brothers working on it right now. Plumbing, electrical, equipment certification. We'll be ready." "The mortgage?" "Lindsay Collins is filing a formal dispute with the bank tomorrow morning. The rate change was illegal. If we can prove it, Ryan gets refunded every overpayment for the last 18 months. That alone covers 3 months of back payments." "And Greer?" Stix closed his laptop. "That's where it gets interesting. I pulled municipal records this morning. Greer fast-tracked the condemnation hearing. It's scheduled for 2 weeks from today. At that hearing, the city council votes on whether to seize the property. Can we stop it? Legally, we can challenge. We can present evidence of Greer's conflict of interest. We can show the council that the building isn't actually unsafe. But Greer controls 3 of the 5 council seats. He's got the votes. Then we don't just challenge, Gunnar said. We change the math. How? Gunnar looked at Martha. How many people in this town eat at this diner? Martha didn't hesitate. Everybody. At one point or another, everybody in Ridgewood has sat in one of these booths. Ryan Dawson has fed this town for 15 years. He's sponsored Little League teams. He's donated food to the church picnic every 4th of July. He kept this diner open on Christmas Day so nobody in town had to eat alone. Then those people need to know what Greer is doing. Not from us, from each other. Martha smiled. It was the smile of a woman who'd organized church fundraisers, school board campaigns, and every community event Ridgewood had seen in the last 3 decades. Gunnar Hayes, I believe you just asked me to start a revolution. I'm asking you to remind this town who its real family is. At 2:30, Lily's school bus dropped her off in front of the diner. She ran through the front door, backpack bouncing, and stopped short at the sight of Bull serving lunch to a packed house. Every booth was full. A line stretched to the door. Bull, why are there so many people? Word got out, little bit. Turns out your daddy's cooking isn't the only thing people been hungry for. They've been hungry for a reason to show up. Lily threaded through the crowd to her usual booth, where Gunnar sat with Stix and a woman she didn't recognize. The woman had brown hair, kind eyes, and a briefcase that looked like it meant business. Lily, this is Lindsay Collins, Martha's daughter. She's a lawyer. Lindsay extended her hand, and Lily shook it with the solemn gravity of a child who understood that lawyers meant serious things were happening. Lily, I've been looking into your father's situation. I want to help, but I need to ask you some questions. Is that okay? More questions? Different questions, about the man with the clipboard. Lily sat up straighter. Mayor Greer. When he came to the diner, did he talk to anyone? Did he leave anything besides the business card? Lily thought carefully. He tried the front door, but I'd already locked it and turned off the lights. He walked around the building. He took pictures with his phone, and he talked to somebody on the phone. I could hear him through the back wall because the window was cracked. Lindsay leaned forward. Do you remember what he said? He said, the property will be available by spring, and he said something about the owner not being in any position to fight, and then he laughed. Lindsay looked at Gunnar, the kind of look that said that changes everything. He laughed, Lily repeated. My daddy's in the hospital and that man stood outside our diner and laughed. Gunnar's hand tightened on his coffee cup until his knuckles went white. Lily, Lindsay said carefully, would you be willing to tell a judge what you just told me? Yes, no hesitation, no fear, just the iron will of a little girl who'd been carrying her father's world on burned hands for 3 weeks and had finally found people strong enough to help her hold it. Lindsay started packing her briefcase. Gunnar, I'm filing an emergency motion tomorrow morning to block the condemnation proceedings pending investigation of Greer's conflict of interest. Lily's testimony about his phone call is circumstantial, but combined with Stick's financial records and the suspicious timing of the mortgage rate change, we have enough to get a hearing. How long? If the judge grants the motion, it buys us 30 days, maybe 60. And if he doesn't? Lindsay paused. Then we have 2 weeks before the council votes, and Frank Greer gets exactly what he wants. Gunnar stood, walked to the window. Outside, the parking lot full of Harleys gleamed under the afternoon sun. 43 bikes. 43 brothers who dropped everything on a phone call. And somewhere across town, a man in a mayor's office who thought he could steal a dying man's legacy because nobody would stop him. Gunnar pulled out his phone and dialed a number. This is Hayes. I need to talk to the National Council. Yeah, I know what time it is. Tell them it's about Ridgewood, Ohio. Tell them we're about to make some noise and they're going to want to be on the right side of it. He hung up and turned back to the room. Lily sat in her booth, homework spread out on the table, a glass of milk beside her. Bull slid a fresh plate of food in front of her without being asked. Sticks typed furiously on his laptop. Lindsay was already on the phone with the courthouse. Martha was handing out casserole to a line of customers that now stretched around the block. And Ray Dawson sat alone in the back office, holding his brother's medical file in trembling hands, reading the surgeon's notes about windows closing and chances narrowing, and making a quiet promise to a photograph on the wall. We're going to bring him home, Sarah, he whispered to his dead sister-in-law's picture. I swear to God, we're going to bring your husband home to your little girl. Outside, the rumble of more motorcycles grew louder. Word had reached 3 more chapters. By nightfall, 67 bikes would fill the parking lot. By week's end, the number would triple. Frank Greer had no idea what was coming, but Ridgewood was about to find out. Lindsay Collins filed the emergency motion at 8:14 on Tuesday morning, and by 8:47, Frank Greer knew about it. Small towns don't keep secrets. They circulate them like blood through a body, and Ridgewood's veins ran hot that week. Gunnar got the call from Sticks at 9 sharp. Greer's moving fast. He's called an emergency session with the building inspector. They're coming to the diner at noon, today, not in 2 weeks, today. He can't do that. Lindsay said we had time. He's the mayor, Gunnar. He doesn't need permission. He needs a signature from the county inspector, and he's got one in his pocket. If they cite enough violations today, they can issue an immediate shutdown order. Forget the condemnation hearing. He'll close us down before the judge even reads Lindsay's motion. Gunnar gripped the phone so hard the case cracked. How many hours do we have? 3. Then we've got 3 hours to make this diner the cleanest building in Ohio. He didn't waste a second. The call went out to every angel on site, and within minutes, 60 men moved with coordinated fury through Dawson's diner. Plumbing that had leaked for years got sealed. Electrical panels that had been jury-rigged got rewired properly. The kitchen floor, cracked in 3 places, got patched with commercial-grade epoxy that a brother from Akron happened to have in his truck because he'd been heading to a job site when Gunnar's original call came in. Bull pulled everything out of the walk-in cooler, checked temperatures, tossed anything past date, and reorganized with the precision of a man who'd passed Army health inspections in combat zones. 2 brothers who'd worked in restaurant supply back in their civilian lives calibrated every piece of equipment in the kitchen, replacing gaskets, cleaning grease traps, and documenting everything with photographs and timestamps. Lily came through the front door at 11:30, dropped off early by Uncle Ray after a dentist appointment. She stopped cold when she saw the organized chaos. What happened? What's wrong? Gunnar caught her before she could spiral. Nothing's wrong. We're just getting ready for company. The clipboard man? Something like that. Lily, I need you to do me a favor. What? I need you to go sit in your booth and do your homework. Can you do that? Is it bad? Gunnar knelt. It's a test, and we're going to pass it. But I need you calm, and I need you safe, and I need you in that booth looking like the happiest kid in Ridgewood. Can you do that for me? Lily studied his face with those 2 old eyes. You're scared. I'm prepared, there's a difference. Daddy says that's what scared people say. Bull's laugh boomed from the kitchen. She's got your number, boss. Lily went to her booth, but she didn't open her homework. She sat with her hands folded, watching the door, waiting for the enemy with the calm readiness of a child who'd learned that the worst things always come through doors. At noon exactly, 2 vehicles pulled into the parking lot, a county building inspector's van and a black sedan with municipal plates. Frank Greer stepped out of the sedan in a press suit, his silver hair catching the light, his face wearing the practiced smile of a man who believed he'd already won. The building inspector was a heavy-set man named Dale Kirby, who carried his clipboard like a weapon. He'd done this before. You could see it in the way he didn't look at people, only at surfaces and pipes and wiring. People complicated things. Surfaces told simple stories. Greer walked through the front door first. He stopped when he saw the diner. Clean, gleaming, packed with customers, and populated by more leather-wearing bikers than he'd expected. Mr. Hayes, Greer said, recovering smoothly, I didn't realize you'd taken an interest in the restaurant business. Didn't realize you'd taken an interest in stealing from sick men, Gunnar replied. He didn't stand. Didn't need to. Greer's smile tightened, but held. I'm here in an official capacity. Mr. Kirby needs to conduct a routine health and safety inspection. I trust that won't be a problem. Not a problem at all. Place is cleaner than your conscience. Greer ignored the jab and nodded to Kirby, who immediately began his inspection, starting with the kitchen. Bull stepped aside to give him access, but his massive frame remained close enough to observe every mark on that clipboard. Sticks, Gunnar said quietly. Camera on. Record everything. Sticks already had his phone out, documenting the inspection from a respectful distance. Lindsay Collins had coached them on this. Record everything. Challenge nothing in the moment. Let the inspector work. If there were irregularities, the footage would matter later. Kirby moved through the kitchen with methodical thoroughness. He checked the grease trap. Clean. He checked food storage temperatures. Perfect. He tested the fire suppression system. Functional. He examined the electrical panel, newly wired, up to code, with documentation tags from a licensed electrician, one of the brothers from Pennsylvania who'd maintained his certification precisely for moments like this. With each passing check, Greer's smile eroded. He'd expected a failing building. He'd expected ammunition. Instead, he was watching his weapon dismantle itself in real time. Then Kirby reached the back hallway. He opened the door to the storage room, shined his flashlight along the ceiling, and stopped. "Water damage," he said, marking his clipboard. "Compromised structural integrity in the ceiling joist. This section would need to be replaced before passing full inspection." Gunnar moved to look. The ceiling showed old water stains, dried and discolored, from a roof leak that had been patched months ago. The damage was cosmetic, not structural. Anybody with construction experience could see that. "That's surface staining from a repaired leak," Gunnar said evenly. "Joist is solid. I'll need an engineer's assessment to confirm," Kirby replied without looking up. "Until then, I'm citing it as a structural concern." "Convenient," Stix muttered from behind his camera. Greer stepped forward, his voice carrying the smooth authority of a man playing his trump card. "Mr. Hayes, structural concerns in a commercial building where a minor child is present create an immediate safety issue. I may be compelled to issue a temporary closure pending engineer review." "How temporary?" "Could be weeks, could be longer. Engineering assessments take time." And there it was, the real play. Not a condemnation hearing, not a council vote, a building inspection citation that would close the diner immediately, cut off the family's income, and give Greer everything he needed to accelerate the property seizure while Ryan lay helpless in a hospital bed. Lily heard it all. She'd moved from her booth to the hallway, standing behind Bull's massive frame, listening with the focused intensity of a child whose entire world hung on the words of men in suits. "You can't close Daddy's diner," she said, stepping out from behind Bull. Greer looked down at her. For the first time, his smile faltered. "It's one thing to steal from a name on a piece of paper. It's another thing entirely to do it while that name's 8-year-old daughter watches you." "Sweetheart, this is an adult matter. Don't call me sweetheart. You came to our diner when Daddy was in the hospital. You walked around our building and took pictures and talked on the phone about how the property would be available by spring. I heard you." The color drained from Greer's face. "I heard you laugh," Lily continued, her small voice cutting through the silence. "My daddy was in the hospital and you stood outside his building and you laughed." Kirby's pen stopped moving. He looked at Greer with an expression that shifted from professional neutrality to something more complicated. "The child is clearly upset and confused," Greer said quickly. "This has nothing to do with the inspection." "Mayor Greer." Lindsay Collins stepped through the front door with timing so perfect it could only have been planned. She wore a navy suit, carried a leather portfolio, and walked with the quiet confidence of a woman who'd already done her homework. "Miss Collins," Greer's voice cooled, "this is a municipal inspection. Your presence isn't required." "It is when my client's property rights are being violated. Mr. Kirby, I'd like to note for the record that I'll be filing a formal objection to any citation that isn't supported by current building code standards. I have a licensed structural engineer on retainer who can assess that ceiling joist within 24 hours. Additionally, I'll be requesting the inspection records for every commercial property in Ridgewood to determine whether this establishment is being held to the same standards as other businesses." Greer's jaw tightened. "Are you implying—" "I'm stating, Mayor Greer, that selective enforcement of building codes against a property you have a documented financial interest in acquiring constitutes a conflict of interest under Ohio Revised Code, Section 102.03. I filed a formal ethics complaint with the Ohio Ethics Commission this morning. You should be receiving notifications shortly." The diner went dead quiet. Gunnar watched Greer's face and saw something he recognized, the expression of a man who realizes he's been outmaneuvered. Greer had expected to walk in, shut down a failing diner, and walk out with one more step toward his payday. Instead, he'd walked into a trap. "This inspection is about public safety," Greer said, but his voice had lost its polish. "Nothing more." "Then let it be about public safety," Lindsay replied. "Mr. Kirby, please continue your inspection thoroughly and fairly. We welcome it. We have nothing to hide. Kirby looked between Lindsay and Greer. Something shifted in his posture. The man wasn't corrupt, he was pressured. And pressure looks different when it's exposed to daylight. I'll complete the standard inspection, Kirby said carefully. The structural concern will be noted as requiring follow-up assessment. I won't recommend immediate closure based on surface water staining alone. Greer's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Dale, it's surface staining, Frank. I've been doing this for 20 years. I know what a compromised joist looks like, and that isn't it. If there were a sound for a plan collapsing, it would have been the silence that followed. Greer looked around the diner, at the bikers who watched him without speaking, at the customers who'd stopped eating to listen, at the 8-year-old girl who'd called him a liar to his face, and at the lawyer who just lit a match under his political career. We'll see how the Ethics Commission responds, Greer said tightly. He turned and walked toward the door. Mayor Greer, Lily's voice stopped him. He turned back. My daddy always saved you a booth on Sunday mornings, the one by the window. He said you liked your eggs over easy and your coffee black. He remembered. Every week. Greer stared at her. What's your point? My point is my daddy treated you like family, and this is what you did back. Greer left without another word. Through the window, they watched him get into his sedan and pull away fast, gravel spraying behind his tires. Kirby finished his inspection in silence. He found 2 minor citations, a hand soap dispenser that needed replacing, and an exit sign with a burned-out bulb. He handed the report to Styx with a look that carried something that might have been apology. Fix these 2 items within 48 hours and you're in full compliance, he said. I'll file my report with the county, not the mayor's office. Appreciate that, Gunner said. Kirby paused at the door. That little girl, she really heard him say that? About the property being available? Every word. Kirby shook his head slowly. Some men forget that walls have ears, especially when there's a kid on the other side trying to save her family. He left. The diner erupted. Brothers who'd been holding their breath for an hour finally exhaled. Bull picked Lily up and swung her onto his shoulder. Little bit, you just stared down the mayor of Ridgewood and won. I didn't win. I told the truth. Same thing, Gunner said. Sometimes the truth is the only weapon you need. But the celebration was short-lived. Gunner's phone rang at 1:15. He listened for 2 minutes, said 3 words, I'm on my way, and hung up with the face of a man who'd just been punched in the gut. That was the hospital. Ryan's taken a turn. The nerve damage has accelerated. Doc Wheeler says the surgery window is closing faster than expected. If he doesn't get to Cleveland within 10 days, the damage becomes permanent. The word permanent landed on the room like a physical weight. Lily's smile vanished. She looked at Gunner from Bull's shoulder, and her voice came out so small it barely existed. Permanent means forever? Gunner nodded. He couldn't lie to her. He'd promised. Your daddy needs that surgery, Lily, and he needs it now. How much? Ray asked from the doorway. He'd arrived during the inspection and had been standing quietly, watching his niece fight battles no child should know existed. The deposit alone is $50,000, Styx said. Total procedure, including the facility in Cleveland, recovery, rehabilitation, we're looking at $180,000. $180,000. Ray sank into a chair. Where in God's name do we find $180,000 in 10 days? Silence, the kind that suffocates. Then Martha Collins stood from her booth, where she'd been quietly eating a slice of bull's pie. She walked to the center of the diner, all 72 years of her carrying the authority of a woman who'd survived a dead husband, raised 3 children alone, and never once asked anyone to feel sorry for her. You find it the same way this town has always survived, Martha said. You ask, you work, and you remind people that the man in that hospital bed never once turned away a hungry person who couldn't pay. Martha, Gunner started, I've got $3,000 in savings. It's yours today. But 3,000 doesn't solve this. You need the whole town. And you need them to show up not because they feel guilty, but because they remember who Ryan Dawson is. People are scared of us, Bull said quietly. Half this town still crosses the street when they see a vest. Then take off the vests, Martha replied simply. Every biker in the room stiffened. I'm not asking you to be ashamed of who you are, Martha continued. I'm asking you to meet people where they are. This town has spent 20 years being afraid of the Hells Angels. You're not going to undo that in a week, but you might undo it in a day if you give them a reason to see past the leather. Gunnar looked at his brothers, these men who wore their patches like armor, who'd bled for the right to wear those vests. Martha was asking them to do something harder than any fight. She was asking them to be vulnerable. She's right, Gunnar said. Boss, she's right, and we all know it. This isn't about our pride. This is about a little girl's father. If taking off a vest for one day means this town opens its wallets and saves Ryan Dawson's life, then we take off the damn vests. Bull reached up and unzipped his leather vest. He folded it carefully, set it on the counter, and stood there in a plain black t-shirt that stretched across his massive chest. Without the patches, without the leather, he looked like what he was. A big man with kind eyes who knew how to cook. One by one, the other brothers followed. Vests came off, got folded, got stacked on the counter with the kind of reverent care that said, "This hurts, but it matters." Lily watched the pile grow, and she understood, in the way children understand sacrifice even when they can't name it, that these men were giving up something important for her father. "Sticks," Gunnar said, his own vest now folded on the pile. "Start planning. We've got 10 days to raise $180,000 in a town where the average income is $32,000 a year. I want ideas by tonight." Already working on it. Sticks hadn't taken his eyes off his laptop. "I'm setting up a benefit structure. We can do a motorcycle run, but not just a local one. I'm talking regional. Every chapter within 500 miles. Entry fees, donations, sponsor booths. If we can get 600 riders at $100 each, that's $60,000 just in entry fees. What about the rest? Online fundraiser, local business sponsorships, Martha's church network, and one more thing." Sticks turned his laptop around. Ryan Dawson's story, the whole thing. The little girl running the diner, the bikers who showed up, the corrupt mayor trying to steal the property. People eat this stuff up, not because it's sensational, because it's real. Gunnar hesitated. "Ryan's a private man." "Ryan's a dying man," Sticks said bluntly. "Privacy is a luxury his daughter can't afford right now." The words hit hard because they were true. Lily tugged on Gunnar's sleeve. "Mr. Gunnar, can I talk to Daddy today? I want to tell him about the inspection. I want to tell him we won." "We haven't won yet, Lily. We won today. That's what Daddy always says. You don't win the whole game at once. You win it one day at a time." Gunnar looked at this child. Burns on her arms, jam stains on her shirt, the weight of a dying father and a stolen home and a corrupt mayor pressing down on shoulders that should have been carrying nothing heavier than a school backpack. "Yeah," he said. "Let's go see your daddy." They drove to Ridgewood General in Ray's pickup. Gunnar, Lily, and Ray in the cab. Bull following on his bike because some habits don't die even when the vest comes off. The hospital smell hit Lily the way it always did. That sharp mix of chemicals and sadness that meant Daddy's sick and nobody can fix it. Ryan Dawson lay in a bed that seemed too big for him. He'd lost weight since Lily's last visit. His blonde hair was thinner, his face gaunter, and his hands, the hands that had fixed engines and flipped burgers and held his daughter when she cried, lay still on the white sheets. But his eyes lit up when Lily walked through the door. "There's my girl." Lily climbed onto the bed carefully, the way the nurses had taught her, and pressed herself against her father's side. "Daddy, I have so much to tell you." "I heard some of it. Ryan's voice was weak but steady. He looked past Lily to Gunnar, who stood in the doorway. Ray told me about the diner, about the angels, about all of it. Ryan, come here, Gunnar. Gunnar approached the bed. He'd faced down men who wanted to kill him without flinching, but walking toward this bed felt like the hardest thing he'd ever done. My brother told me what Lily's been doing, Ryan said. His voice cracked on his daughter's name. 3 weeks. 3 weeks she cooked in that kitchen alone, burned her hands, skipped meals. Tears ran down his hollow cheeks. I failed her. You raised her, Gunnar corrected. You raised a kid with more guts than most grown men I know. That's not failure. That's a father who taught his daughter what fighting looks like. She's 8 years old. She shouldn't know what fighting looks like. No, she shouldn't. But she does, and she's still standing. Because of you. Ryan closed his eyes. His hand found Lily's hair and stroked it gently. Gunnar, I can't pay you back for this. Not the help, not the lawyers, not the doctors. I've got nothing. You've got everything. You've got a daughter who loves you enough to burn her hands every night to keep your dream alive. You've got a brother who'd mortgage his house for you. You've got a town that's starting to remember what you mean to them. Gunnar gripped the bed rail. And you've got a family of men who owe you 15 years of kindness that we never properly repaid. So don't talk to me about paying back. Talk to me about getting better. Talk to me about walking through that diner door on your own 2 feet. Ryan opened his eyes. Something burned in them that wasn't pain. The surgery. They told me about the surgery. Cleveland, 10 days. We're raising the money. $180,000 in 10 days. Gunnar, that's what's happening. The only thing I need from you is a yes. Ryan looked down at Lily, curled against his side, her burned fingers wrapped around his hospital gown. This child who tried to hold his entire world together with her bare hands. Yes, he said. Lily's grip tightened on his gown. You're going to walk again, Daddy. Bull promised. And Gunnar promised, and I promised, and Dawson's don't break promises. Ryan pulled her closer, his thin arms trembling with the effort. No, baby, Dawson's don't break promises. Gunnar stepped into the hallway. Bull stood against the wall, arms crossed, his face doing the thing it did when emotions got too big for words. How is he? Scared, determined, loves that kid more than breathing. Then we better make sure he gets to keep doing both. Gunnar's phone buzzed, a text from Styx. 2 words that changed the trajectory of everything. Greer's responding. Gunnar opened the full message. The mayor had called an emergency council meeting for Thursday. He was pushing to accelerate the condemnation vote, moving it up from 2 weeks to 4 days. If the council voted to seize the property before Lindsay's ethics complaint gained traction, it wouldn't matter what the commission found. The diner would already be gone. 4 days. They had 10 days to raise the money for Ryan's surgery, and now they had 4 days to save his building. Gunnar leaned against the hospital wall and closed his eyes. For one moment, just one, he let himself feel the full weight of what they'd taken on. A dying man, a desperate child, a corrupt politician, and a town that couldn't decide if it was worth saving. Then he opened his eyes and dialed Styx. Move everything up, the benefit run, the fundraiser, the community rally, all of it. We do it Saturday, 4 days from now. Gunnar, that's impossible. We can't organize. Styx, that little girl burned her hands on a grill every night for 3 weeks because she believed impossible things were worth fighting for. You telling me a room full of grown men can't match the courage of an 8-year-old? Silence on the line. Then Styx's voice, quiet and hard as steel. Saturday it is. I'll make the calls. Gunnar hung up and walked back into Ryan's room. Lily had fallen asleep against her father's chest. Ryan's hand rested on her head, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. She'll be okay, Ryan. Promise me something, Gunnar. Name it. If the surgery doesn't work, If I don't come back from this, Ryan's voice shook but didn't break. Promise me she'll never work alone at 3 in the morning again. Promise me she'll be a kid. Gunnar gripped Ryan's hand. I promise. And Gunnar? Yeah? Call your daughter. Gunnar stood there holding a dying man's hand, watching a sleeping child's chest rise and fall, and felt something crack open inside him that had been sealed shut for years. Yeah, he said quietly. I will. Gunnar didn't sleep Wednesday night. He sat in a booth at Dawson's Diner with 3 phones charging on the table, a cold cup of coffee, and a legal pad covered in numbers that still didn't add up. Stix sat across from him, laptop glowing, running calculations for the 3rd time because the first 2 times had produced answers nobody wanted to hear. Give it to me straight, Gunnar said. If we get 600 riders at $100 entry fee, that's $60,000. Online fundraiser's been live for 18 hours. We've pulled in $11,000. Local business sponsorships, Martha's Church Network, direct donations from the chapters. We're looking at another $35,000 to $40,000. Total realistic projection for Saturday, somewhere between $100,000 and $115,000. We need $180,000. I know what we need, Gunnar. So we're $60,000 to $80,000 short. Stix closed his laptop. There's one more option. I didn't bring it up because I knew how you'd react. Say it. National Fund. The Angels National Emergency Fund has over $200,000 sitting in reserve. One call to the National Council, and this is done. That fund exists for brothers. Ryan's not a patch holder. Ryan's been declared family by a chapter president. That qualifies under the 2019 amendment. I checked. Gunnar rubbed his eyes. The National Council was politics. Asking them for money meant owing favors. And owing favors to men at the top of a national organization meant complications that could follow him for years. But Ryan Dawson's spine was deteriorating by the hour, and Lily's face when she'd asked what permanent means still burned behind his eyelids every time he closed them. Make the call, Gunnar said. Set up a conference for tomorrow morning. I'll make the case myself. You sure? Razor Mike doesn't like you. Hasn't since the Detroit situation. Razor Mike doesn't have to like me. He has to listen to me. And when I tell him about an 8-year-old girl burning her hands on a grill to save her dying father, he's going to listen. Because underneath all the politics and the power plays, that man has a granddaughter, and granddaughters change the math. At 6 in the morning, Bull arrived to open the kitchen. He found Lily already there, sitting in her booth, dressed for school, her backpack beside her. Little bit. How'd you get here? School doesn't start for 2 hours. Uncle Ray dropped me off early. He had to go to the post office. Lily pushed a piece of paper across the table. I made something. Bull picked it up. A hand-drawn flyer, colored in crayon, showing a motorcycle next to a plate of eggs. Across the top in careful 8-year-old handwriting, Help My Daddy Come Home, Dawson's Diner Benefit Ride, Saturday. I made 30 of them, Lily said. I stayed up last night. I'm going to ask my teacher if I can put them up at school. Bull held the flyer with hands that could crush engine blocks and felt something shift inside his chest that he'd spent 20 years keeping locked down. These are real good, Lily. The motorcycle doesn't look right. The wheels are too big. Wheels look perfect to me. Lily chewed her lip. Bull, can I ask you something? Anything. When Gunnar promised my daddy that I'd be okay, did he mean it? Or was he just saying it because that's what people say in hospitals? Bull set down the flyer and sat across from her. His massive frame filled the booth, but his voice came out gentle enough to hold glass. You know how your daddy fixes engines? How he listens to them and knows exactly what's wrong just by the sound? Lily nodded. Gunnar's like that with people. He doesn't make promises he can't keep because he knows exactly what it costs when a promise breaks. When that man told your daddy you'd be okay, he meant it the way your daddy means it when he says an engine's going to run. With everything he's got? with everything he's got. Lily picked up her flyer and put it carefully back in her backpack. Then I believe him. At 9 that morning, Gunnar dialed into the National Council conference call from the diner's back office. 5 men on the line, each one representing regions that spanned half the country. Razor Mike Patterson, national president, spoke first. His voice carried the kind of authority that doesn't ask permission. Gunnar, you've been making noise in Ohio. My phone's been ringing for 3 days. Then you know why I'm calling. I know you've got 60 brothers camped out at a diner in a town nobody's heard of. You've filed ethics complaints against a sitting mayor, and you've got a chapter fund that's running dry. What I don't know is why this is a national matter. Gunnar took a breath. He'd rehearsed this, planned every word. But when he opened his mouth, the rehearsed version disappeared, and what came out instead was the truth, raw and unpolished. Mike, 15 years ago, I walked into a diner in Ridgewood with nothing. I just gotten out. No money, no prospects, nothing but my vest and my bike. The man behind the counter didn't ask who I was, didn't ask where I'd been. He put a plate in front of me and said, "Eat, brother. You look hungry." Gunnar paused. That man fed our brothers for 15 years. Every chapter that rode through Ohio stopped at his place because it was the one diner between Columbus and Akron where a man in a vest could sit down and eat without somebody calling the police. He never charged us extra, never turned us away, never asked for anything. I hear you, Razor Mike said, but the fund. His 8-year-old daughter ran his diner alone for 3 weeks while he was in the hospital. She cooked on a commercial grill at 1 in the morning. She's got burns on her arms. She counted money on her fingers because nobody taught her to use a register. She did this because she was afraid that if the diner closed, her daddy would have nothing to come home to. Silence on the line. The man needs spinal surgery in Cleveland. Without it, he never walks again. The window closes in 7 days. We're raising money Saturday, but we're short. I'm asking the National Fund for $70,000 to cover the gap. $70,000 is a significant withdrawal, Razor Mike said, but his voice had changed. The political calculation was still there, but something else had crept in underneath it. What's the return? The return is a man walks again. A little girl gets her father back, and every brother who rides through Ohio for the next 30 years knows that when an angel says family, he means it. That's the return, Mike. That's what $70,000 buys. 40 seconds of silence. Gunnar counted every one. I'll put it to a vote, Razor Mike said. You'll have an answer by tonight. The line went dead. Gunnar sat in the back office, staring at his phone, and realized his hands were shaking. Not from fear, from the effort of holding still when everything inside him wanted to break something. Boss? Sticks appeared in the doorway. We've got another problem. Of course we do. CPS is back. Sandra Mitchell just pulled into the parking lot. She's got someone with her. Looks official. Gunnar stood, straightened his shirt, no vest, per Martha's advice, and walked out to meet whatever was coming next. Sandra Mitchell stood by the front door with a man Gunnar didn't recognize. Middle-aged, gray suit, county lanyard around his neck. His face carried the blank professionalism of someone who'd learned to separate emotion from decision. Mr. Hayes, Sandra said, this is Thomas Burke, supervisor for Richland County Family Services. He's here to conduct a secondary review of Lily's situation. Secondary review? What happened to the Friday deadline? Sandra's expression tightened. Something she wasn't saying. The timeline has been adjusted based on new information received by our office. What new information? Thomas Burke stepped forward. Mr. Hayes, we received a formal complaint alleging that Lily Dawson is being exposed to criminal influences and an unsafe domestic environment. The complaint cites the presence of known motorcycle club members in a commercial establishment where the child spends significant time. Who filed the complaint? Complaints are confidential. Gunnar didn't need a name. He knew. Greer wasn't just going after the building anymore. He was going after the child. Where's Lily? Sandra asked. At school, where she belongs. We'll need to visit Mr. Dawson's apartment this afternoon, and we'll need to speak with Lily again, today. Her uncle is her guardian. You should coordinate with him. We will, but Mr. Hayes, I want to be direct with you. Sandra lowered her voice. The nature of this complaint puts Lily at risk of temporary removal pending investigation. I need to see a stable, safe environment with appropriate adult supervision. If I can document that clearly, I can push back against the complaint. If I can't, you'll take her. Sandra didn't blink. The state will place her in temporary foster care until the investigation is complete. Gunnar felt the rage rise like heat from asphalt. He held it, channeled it into the cold, clear focus that had kept him alive for 3 decades. What do you need to see? A clean home, a present guardian, consistent school attendance, no evidence of neglect or endangerment. And frankly, Mr. Hayes, I need to see that the people around Lily are a stabilizing influence, not a destabilizing one. You're asking if the bikers are a problem? I'm asking if this child's daily reality includes appropriate adult role models and a safe domestic routine. That's my job. Help me do it. Gunnar called Ray immediately. Get your apartment spotless. CPS is coming this afternoon for a secondary review. Someone filed a complaint. We both know who. Ray's voice went tight. What kind of complaint? They're saying Lily's being exposed to criminal influences. They're saying the environment is unsafe. Criminal? Gunnar, these men rebuilt my brother's diner. They fed my niece. I know, but the paperwork doesn't care about intentions. It cares about appearances. Ray, listen to me carefully. When CPS comes to your apartment, Lily needs to be there. She needs clean clothes, a made bed, food in the fridge, and a story about her daily routine that doesn't include a single mention of one of many diner shifts. Can you do that? I'll do whatever it takes. And Ray, when they ask about us, about the Angels, tell them the truth. We're community volunteers helping a local business during a family crisis. That's not a lie. That's exactly what we are. At 3:30, Lily's school bus dropped her at the diner. She walked through the door carrying a stack of hand-drawn flyers that was noticeably smaller than the 30 she'd left with. I put them everywhere, she announced. The bulletin board at school, the library, Mrs. Peterson's classroom. The grocery store let me tape one in the window. That's my girl, Bull said from the kitchen. How many you got left? 3. But Mr. Gunnar, something happened at school. What happened? Lily sat in her booth and unzipped her backpack. She pulled out a Ziploc bag and set it on the table. Inside was a collection of bills and coins, 5s, 1s, quarters, dimes. My class did a collection. Mrs. Peterson told them about Daddy, and the kids brought in their allowance money. Tommy Baker gave $5 whole. He said his mom gets her car fixed at our diner, and she'd want him to help. Gunnar picked up the bag. How much is in here? $47.63. I counted 3 times. $47. A drop in an ocean of debt. But Lily held that bag like it was a chest of gold, because to an 8-year-old, $47 from kids who gave up candy and toys and allowance because they wanted to help, that was worth more than anything. Every dollar counts, little bit, Bull said, and his voice was thick. Lily, Gunnar said carefully, we need to go to Uncle Ray's apartment. Some people need to visit and make sure everything's okay. Lily's face changed instantly. The brightness vanished. The government people again? Yes. Because of the clipboard man? Gunnar hesitated. We think so. Lily zipped her backpack slowly. He's not going to stop, is he? Until he takes everything. He's going to stop. We're going to make him stop. But right now, I need you to go home with Uncle Ray and show these people that you're safe and happy and taken care of. Can you do that? I am safe. I am taken care of. Why do I have to prove it? Because sometimes the world makes you prove things that should be obvious. It's not fair, Lily, but it's real. Lily stood. She picked up the Ziploc bag of allowance money and held it against her chest. When I grow up, I'm going to be a lawyer like Lindsay, and I'm going to make sure no clipboard man ever does this to another family. She walked out the door with her uncle, her small frame carrying the kind of purpose that made grown men step aside. At 4:15, Gunner's phone rang. Razor Mike. Gunner, the council voted. Gunner gripped the phone. And? 3-2, the money's approved. $70,000 from the National Emergency Fund. Effective immediately. Wire transfer goes out tomorrow morning. Gunner leaned against the counter and pressed his hand over his eyes. Sticks watched him from across the room, reading the conversation from body language alone. Mike, Don't thank me. Thank that little girl. I told the council what you told me, about the burns on her arms and the money she counted on her fingers. Razor Mike Patterson doesn't cry, Gunner. You know that. But I'm telling you right now that when I hung up that call this morning, I sat in my office for 10 minutes and I didn't move. My granddaughter is 8 years old. Same age. Same damn age. I owe you, Mike. You owe that child a future. That's what you owe. Now go raise the rest of that money on Saturday and bring that man home. Gunner hung up and looked at Sticks. 70,000. Approved. Sticks closed his eyes. That puts us within range. If Saturday goes the way we planned, we're covered. We might even have surplus for the medical fund. Don't count surplus before it exists. What's the rider count? As of 30 minutes ago, 412 confirmed. Still climbing. Chapters from Michigan, Kentucky, West Virginia, and New York just signed on. We might break 700. And the council meeting? Thursday? Greer's vote? Sticks's expression hardened. Lindsay filed the emergency injunction this morning. Judge hasn't ruled yet. If he grants it, the council vote gets postponed until the ethics investigation is complete. If he doesn't, Greer holds the vote tomorrow and we lose the building. When does the judge rule? Could be tonight, could be tomorrow morning, could be 5 minutes before the council convenes. Judges don't run on anybody's schedule but their own. Gunner looked at the clock. 22 hours until the council meeting. 3 days until the benefit ride. 7 days until Ryan's surgical window closed forever. At 6 that evening, Sandra Mitchell completed her home visit at Ray's apartment. Gunner wasn't there. Lindsay had advised him to stay away, to let the family present itself without the complication of leather and patches. But Ray called him the moment Sandra left. She seemed satisfied, Ray said, his voice carrying the exhausted relief of a man who just passed the most important test of his life. Lily's room was clean. Fridge was full. I showed her the school attendance record, the homework folder, the bedtime routine. She checked everything. What did she say? She said she'd file a favorable preliminary report. She said Lily is clearly loved and cared for. But Gunner, she also said the formal investigation stays open until Ryan's medical situation is resolved. If Ryan can't resume custody, the case goes to family court. Then Ryan resumes custody. That's the plan. That's always been the plan. And if the surgery doesn't work, it's going to work, Ray. But if it doesn't, then I made a promise to your brother that his daughter will be safe, and I keep my promises. At 8:40 Thursday morning, Lindsay Collins stood in courtroom 3 of the Richland County Courthouse, arguing before Judge Harold Yates for an emergency injunction to block the Ridgewood City Council's condemnation vote. Frank Greer sat in the gallery, flanked by his city attorney, his face carrying the controlled confidence of a man who still believed he held the winning hand. Gunner sat in the back row. No vest, clean shirt. He'd shaved for the first time in a week. Beside him, Sticks took notes on his legal pad, while Martha Collins sat with her hands folded, watching the proceedings with the patient intensity of a woman who'd learned that justice moves slowly but remembers everything. Your Honor, Lindsay said, her voice steady and clear, The city of Ridgewood is attempting to condemn a property belonging to a hospitalized veteran who cannot defend himself. The mayor who initiated these proceedings has a documented financial relationship with the development company that stands to profit from the acquisition. An 8-year-old child, Mr. Dawson's daughter, personally witnessed the mayor discussing the property's availability in a phone conversation outside the building. This isn't urban development. This is predatory seizure of a vulnerable family's assets. Greer's attorney stood. Your Honor, the condemnation proceedings are based on legitimate building code concerns documented by a licensed county inspector. The same inspector who found only 2 minor violations after a thorough review, Lindsay interrupted. A hand soap dispenser and a light bulb. Both corrected within 24 hours. The building is in full compliance. There are no structural issues. There are no safety concerns. The only issue is that the mayor wants the land. Judge Yates looked at the paperwork for what felt like an hour, but was probably 90 seconds. He removed his glasses, rubbed the bridge of his nose, put them back on. I'm granting the temporary injunction, he said. The condemnation vote is postponed for 60 days, pending review by the Ohio Ethics Commission. Mayor Greer, you are advised to recuse yourself from any further proceedings related to the Dawson property. If the Ethics Commission finds a conflict of interest, this court will entertain a motion for permanent injunction. Lindsay turned to Gunnar. She didn't smile. Lawyers don't smile in courtrooms. But her eyes said everything. Greer stood from his seat. His city attorney grabbed his arm, whispered something urgent. But Greer pulled away. He walked toward the door, and as he passed Gunnar's row, he stopped. This isn't over, Hayes. Gunnar looked up at him. Yeah, Frank, it is. You just don't know it yet. Greer left. The courtroom doors swung shut behind him with a sound like a period at the end of a sentence. Martha leaned over to Gunnar. That man's been running this town for 12 years. He's never lost a vote. He's never been challenged. He's going to come back harder. Let him, Gunnar said. Saturday's coming, and this town is about to remember who it really is. At Ridgewood General, 3 miles from the courthouse, Ryan Dawson received the news by phone. Lindsay called him directly, explaining the injunction, the 60-day reprieve, the ethics investigation. Ryan listened in silence, and when she finished, he asked only one question. Is my daughter safe? Your daughter is safe, Mr. Dawson. She's surrounded by people who love her. Then everything else is just buildings and money. Tell Gunnar I said thank you. And tell Lily I said I'm coming home. Ryan hung up and stared at the ceiling. His back burned with the constant fire of damaged nerves. His legs hadn't moved properly in days. The surgery in Cleveland wasn't a guarantee. The doctors had been clear about that. 60% chance of significant improvement. 20% chance of partial recovery, and a 20% chance that nothing would change at all. But 60% was more than zero, and for a man whose daughter had been working alone at 1 a.m. because she refused to let his dream die, 60% might as well have been 100. He reached for the phone and dialed the one number he called every night. Daddy! Lily's voice exploded through the speaker. Hey, little mechanic, I heard you had a big day. The judge said the clipboard man can't take our diner, and Gunnar wore a clean shirt to court, and Bull made meatloaf for dinner, and it was the best meatloaf I ever had, but don't tell him I said that, because I told him your meatloaf is better. Ryan laughed. It hurt. Everything hurt. But the sound of his daughter's voice, bright and breathless and full of the hope he'd been afraid she'd lost, was worth every ounce of pain. Lily, listen to me. Saturday's going to be a big day. A lot of people are going to come together to help our family. I need you to be brave. I'm always brave, Daddy. I know you are, baby. But Saturday, I need you to be something harder than brave. I need you to let other people be brave for you. Can you do that? What do you mean? I mean you've been carrying too much for too long. Saturday, it's time to set it down. Let other people carry it for a while. That's not weakness, Lily. That's family. Lily was quiet for a moment. Daddy? Yeah? I put the allowance money in the fundraiser jar. $47.63. Tommy Baker gave $5. Ryan closed his eyes. Tears ran down his temples into the pillow. That's a lot of money, sweetheart. It's not enough, but Mrs. Peterson says every ocean starts with one drop. Your teacher's a smart woman. Daddy, one more thing? What's that? I love you bigger than the whole diner. I love you bigger than all the diners in the world, Lily girl. Now go to bed. Saturday's coming, and you need your rest. He hung up and lay in the darkness of his hospital room, listening to the beep of machines and the quiet footsteps of nurses in the hallway. In 3 days, hundreds of strangers would ride into his town to save his life. In 7 days, he'd either walk again or he wouldn't. But tonight, his daughter was safe. She was sleeping in a bed, not standing on a step stool over a hot grill. She was surrounded by people who'd shown up when nobody expected them to. And for the first time since the accident that had shattered his spine and nearly shattered his family, Ryan Dawson believed that the world might actually be kind enough to give them a second chance. In Ridgewood, the motorcycles were already gathering. By Friday evening, the first advance riders from distant chapters would begin rolling into town. By Saturday morning, the streets would vibrate with the sound of 600 engines. And by Saturday night, this small Ohio town would learn something that no building inspector or mayor or condemnation vote could ever take away. That family doesn't ask permission. Saturday broke over Ridgewood with a sound the town had never heard before. 614 motorcycles lined every street within a half-mile radius of Dawson's Diner, and more kept coming. They rolled in from Michigan and Kentucky, from West Virginia and New York, from Pennsylvania and Indiana, a river of chrome and leather and purpose that turned a dying Main Street into the loudest, most alive place in Ohio. Lily stood on the front steps of the diner at 7 in the morning, her blonde hair brushed and braided by Martha Collins, wearing a clean white t-shirt that Bull had custom ordered from a screen printer in Akron. Across the front, in bright red letters, it read, "Help my daddy come home." "How many is that?" Lily asked Stix, who sat in the doorway with his laptop tracking registrations. 614 confirmed riders, another 90 still rolling in from the east. "We're going to break 700, Lily." 700 people came for my daddy? 700 people came because your daddy spent 15 years being the kind of man worth riding for. Bull had been cooking since 4 in the morning. He'd recruited 6 angels with kitchen experience and transformed the diner into a food operation that would have impressed a military mess hall. Eggs by the hundred, pancakes stacked like towers, coffee flowing from 3 industrial urns that a brother from Toledo had driven through the night to deliver. "Bull, we're running low on eggs," one of the kitchen volunteers called out. "Check the walk-in. There's 20 flats in the back." 20 flats? That's 240 dozen eggs. "I know what it is. Keep cracking." Gunner moved through the crowd with the quiet authority of a general surveying his troops. He shook hands. He accepted donations. He directed riders to registration and parking and food. But every few minutes his eyes found Lily, making sure she was safe, making sure she was smiling, making sure the weight she'd been carrying for weeks stayed off her shoulders for at least this one day. At 9 o'clock, Martha Collins climbed onto a makeshift platform that 3 brothers had built from shipping pallets. She held a microphone that someone had wired to a speaker system borrowed from a church, and her voice carried across the crowd with the practiced clarity of a woman who'd commanded attention in classrooms and town meetings for 5 decades. "Most of you don't know me," Martha said, "but I've been eating breakfast at this diner for 20 years. And in 20 years, I have never seen Ryan Dawson turn away a hungry person. Not once, not a single time. If you couldn't pay, he fed you anyway. If you were lonely, he remembered your name. If you were cold, he poured your coffee before you asked." She paused, let the silence work. "That man is in a hospital bed right now. His spine is broken. His body is failing. and his 8-year-old daughter spent 3 weeks running this diner alone at 1 in the morning because she was too afraid to ask for help and too brave to give up. That little girl is here today, and she asked me to tell you one thing. Martha held out the microphone. Lily stepped forward. 700 bikers and 200 townspeople went quiet. A child's voice filled the silence. Thank you for helping my daddy. Lily's voice cracked, but didn't break. He always said this diner is where people take care of each other. I didn't know he meant this many people. The crowd erupted. Grown men who'd ridden 300 miles wiped their eyes and pretended it was the wind. Women who'd been afraid of motorcycles their entire lives cheered for a little girl they'd never met. And somewhere in the back of the crowd, Sheriff Dale Hutchins stood in civilian clothes, holding an envelope, waiting for the right moment. By noon, the tally board outside the diner showed $87,000 in direct donations. Riders had paid entry fees, bought raffle tickets for 3 motorcycles donated by dealerships, and emptied their wallets at the food stations and merchandise tables. Local businesses that had never acknowledged the Angels' existence sent cash donations with handwritten notes. The hardware store, the pharmacy, the elementary school PTA. We're going to make it, Sticks told Gunner at 12:30. With the national fund wire that hit this morning, we're at $157,000. If this pace holds, we'll clear the full amount by end of day. Don't celebrate yet. I'm not celebrating, I'm calculating. There's a difference. That's what scared people say, Gunner replied, and despite everything, he smiled. At 1 o'clock, a black sedan pulled into the far edge of the parking lot. Gunner spotted it immediately. Frank Greer sat behind the wheel, engine running, watching the event through his windshield. He didn't get out, just sat there, watching his carefully constructed plan dissolve in a sea of motorcycles and community spirit. Sticks noticed too. Want me to handle it? Leave him. Let him watch. Let him see exactly what happens when you try to steal from a family that fights back. Greer sat there for 20 minutes. Then he pulled away slowly, his sedan disappearing down Main Street for the last time as a man who mattered in Ridgewood. At 2:15, Sheriff Hutchins approached the donation table where Ray was managing the cash with Martha. The sheriff moved like a man carrying something heavier than the envelope in his hand. Ray, Sheriff, I owe your family an apology. I stood by while Frank Greer railroaded your brother's property. I didn't ask questions I should have asked. I didn't protect people I swore to protect. Ray studied the man's face. Exhaustion, shame, and underneath something that looked like the painful early stages of doing the right thing. My mother reminded me that your brother made her soup every day for a year after her hip surgery, Hutchins continued. Never charged her, never even mentioned it. She had to tell me because Ryan sure as hell wasn't going to. That sounds like my brother. Hutchins set the envelope on the table. This is from the Police Benevolent Association and from my personal savings. It's not enough to fix what I let happen, but it's a start. Ray opened the envelope, counted, looked up. Dale, this is $8,000. Like I said, it's a start. Ray extended his hand. The sheriff took it. And the crowd that witnessed a lawman and a family shaking hands over a donation table understood that something had shifted in Ridgewood that went deeper than money. At 3 o'clock, Gunner's phone buzzed. A video call from Ridgewood General. He gathered Lily, Ray, Bull, Sticks, and Martha around the laptop set up on the counter. Ryan Dawson's face filled the screen, thinner than last week, paler, but his eyes burned with something fierce. Daddy, Lily pressed against the screen. Can you hear the motorcycles? There's 700 of them. 700. I can hear them, baby, even from here. We're going to make the money, Daddy. Sticks says we're almost there. And the sheriff came. And Bull made so many pancakes. And Tommy Baker's mom is here. And she brought her whole church group and... Lily, Ryan's voice softened. Slow down. Let me look at you. She stopped talking, held still. Let her father study her face through a screen. miles of wire and light separating them, but nothing else. "You look happy," Ryan said, and his voice broke on the word. "I am happy, Daddy." That's all I needed to hear. Ryan looked past Lily to the faces crowded around the screen. Gunnar, Bull, Styx, Ray, Martha, I'm looking at every single one of you, and I want you to know that whatever happens with the surgery, whatever happens next, you've already given me the only thing that matters. You gave my daughter her childhood back. Bull turned away from the screen. His massive shoulders shook once, hard, and he pressed his fist against his mouth. "Ryan," Gunnar said, "we'll see you in Cleveland. The surgery's happening. You're getting on that table, and you're walking out of that hospital. That's not a hope. That's a plan." "Gunnar? Yeah? Did you call your daughter?" Every person around that screen felt the weight of the question. Gunnar's jaw tightened, then relaxed. "Last night, first time in 4 years, she picked up on the second ring. Anne? She said she'd been waiting." Ryan smiled. It was the fullest, most real smile any of them had seen from him since before the accident. "Good. That's real good." The video call ended, and Lily sat quietly for a moment, her hand resting on the laptop screen where her father's face had been. Then she stood, straightened her "Help my daddy come home" shirt, and walked back outside to the crowd that had gathered to save her family. By 5 o'clock, the final tally was in. Styx stood on Martha's platform with the microphone, his thin frame vibrating with a controlled intensity that made the crowd lean in. "Total raised today from entry fees, donations, raffle sales, merchandise, and direct contributions, $118,422. The crowd roared. Styx held up his hand. "Combined with the funds already secured from the Hells Angels National Emergency Fund, the community online fundraiser, and direct chapter donations, the total stands at $212,000. Silence. Then the number sank in. $212,000. 32,000 more than they needed. "The surplus," Styx continued, his voice cracking for the first time anyone could remember, "will be used to establish the Dawson Family Medical Fund, providing emergency assistance to families in Ridgewood facing medical crises. Because no family in this town should ever have to choose between treatment and survival." Lily didn't understand all the numbers, but she understood the tears streaming down her uncle's face. She understood Martha Collins clutching her chest with both hands. She understood Bull lifting her onto his shoulders so the whole crowd could see her, and she understood the sound of 700 voices chanting her father's name. "Dawson, Dawson, Dawson." She raised her small fist in the air, and the chant became a thunder that rolled across Ridgewood like a promise. 5 days later, Gunnar, Bull, Lily, and Ray drove to Cleveland. The surgery took 9 hours. Lily sat in the waiting room the entire time, her legs swinging above the floor, her hand-drawn flyers spread across the table in front of her because she'd brought every last one, including the 3 she'd kept. "Why'd you bring those?" Bull asked. "Because Daddy needs to see them. He needs to know his little girl fought for him." At hour 6, Lily fell asleep with her head on Bull's arm. At hour 8, Gunnar paced the hallway, wearing a track in the linoleum that the nurses would talk about for years. At hour 9, Dr. Catherine Wells walked through the double doors, still in her surgical cap, her face carrying the careful expression of a woman about to change someone's world. "Family of Ryan Dawson?" Everyone stood. Lily woke instantly, her body snapping upright with the alertness of a child who'd spent weeks sleeping with one eye open. "The surgery was successful," Dr. Wells said. "We were able to decompress the spinal cord and repair the nerve pathways. It's going to be a long recovery, months of rehabilitation, hard work, pain, but Mr. Dawson should regain full mobility." "He's going to walk?" Lily whispered. "He's going to walk, sweetheart." Lily didn't cry. She didn't scream. She stood perfectly still for 3 full seconds, processing a future she'd been afraid to imagine. And then she turned to Gunnar and said the most important words of her 8-year-old life. "Can I see my daddy now?" They let her go in first, alone. Ryan was groggy, his face gray with anesthesia, tubes and wires connecting him to machines that beeped and hummed. But when he heard her footsteps, small, quick, unmistakable, his eyes opened. "Hey, little mechanic." "Daddy, the doctor said you're going to walk." "I heard. Somebody told me right before they put me under that Dawsons don't break promises." Lily climbed carefully onto the edge of his bed, avoiding every tube and wire with the practiced skill of a child who'd learned hospital geography the hard way. She pressed herself against his side, and his arm came around her, weak, but there, present, holding. "Daddy?" "Yeah, baby. I don't want to cook burgers at 1 in the morning anymore." Ryan's laugh came out broken and wet and beautiful. "You don't ever have to cook burgers at 1 in the morning again. But I still want to help at the diner, on Saturdays, with Bull. Bull makes better pancakes than me anyway." "I know, but don't tell him I said that. Your secret's safe." They lay there, father and daughter, in a hospital room in Cleveland, 6 weeks removed from the night when everything almost ended, and the night when everything actually began. Outside the door, Gunnar leaned against the wall, listening, and thought about a phone call to Michigan and a daughter who'd said she'd been waiting. 8 weeks after the surgery, Ryan Dawson walked through the front door of his diner under his own power. His legs shook. Each step sent fire up his healing spine. But he walked, and the crowd of people waiting inside, 200 strong, packed into every booth and standing along every wall, erupted with a noise that rattled the windows and could be heard 3 blocks away. Lily hit him at full speed. She wrapped her arms around his waist and held on with the fierce grip of a child who'd spent months learning that holding on was the only thing that ever really mattered. "Easy, baby," Ryan laughed, steadying himself against her force. "I'm still a work in progress. You're home, Daddy. That's all that matters." Ryan looked up from his daughter's head at the faces filling his diner. Bull standing behind the counter in a chef's apron, grinning. Sticks at his corner booth with a laptop and a stack of profit reports. Martha Collins cutting pie. Uncle Ray pouring coffee like he'd been doing it his whole life. And Gunnar Hayes standing by the door, no vest, clean shirt, watching with eyes that held something Ryan had never seen in them before. Peace. "Gunnar, come here." Gunnar crossed the diner, every step watched by people who'd spent years being afraid of men like him, and had learned over the course of one extraordinary month that fear and judgment were poor substitutes for actually knowing someone. "I don't know how to repay this," Ryan said, his voice thick. "You already did. 15 years of hot coffee and human decency. We're just slow at returning favors." "It's more than favors. You saved my daughter." "Your daughter saved herself. We just showed up to help carry what she'd already been holding." Ryan extended his hand. Gunnar took it, and the handshake that passed between them sealed something that didn't need a contract or a signature. Just the grip of 2 men who understood that the strongest bonds in the world aren't built from blood or obligation. They're built from showing up. "Partnership?" Ryan asked. "If you'll have us." "On one condition." "Name it." "Lily works the Saturday breakfast shift, not because she has to, because she wants to, and she wears her own apron." Gunnar reached behind the counter and pulled out a package he'd been hiding for 2 weeks. Inside was a child-sized apron, custom-made, with Lily stitched across the front in blue thread. Lily tore it open, held it up, and put it on with the solemnity of a knight donning armor. "It's perfect." "You're the official Saturday supervisor," Bull declared. "Nobody flips a pancake in this kitchen without your approval." "I accept this responsibility," Lily said, and the entire diner laughed. The kind of laughter that comes from relief and joy and the simple, powerful recognition that the worst is over and the best is just beginning. That evening, after the crowd thinned and the dishes were washed and Lily fell asleep in her booth with her new apron still on, Gunnar sat alone at the counter. Ryan eased himself onto the stool beside him, moving slow, his back still healing, but his legs working, carrying him where he needed to go. She drew flyers, Ryan said quietly. 30 of them, crayon and marker. She took them to school and the grocery store and taped them everywhere she could reach. I know, I saw them. $47.63. That's what her classmates raised. She counted it 3 times. She told me. Ryan stared at the counter his hands had wiped down 10,000 times. I almost lost her, Gunnar. Not to the cancer or the spine or the money. I almost lost her because I was too proud to ask for help. My little girl was burning her hands at 1 a.m, and I was lying in a hospital bed thinking I could handle it alone. Pride's not a sin, Ryan. It's just expensive. Too expensive. I almost paid for it with my daughter's childhood. But you didn't. She's asleep in that booth with a full stomach and a new apron, and a father who walked through the front door today. That's not almost losing. That's winning. Ryan reached under the counter and pulled out a framed photograph. His wife, Sarah. Blonde hair, blue eyes. Lily's face in 20 years. He hung it on the wall beside the register in a new frame that Martha had brought, positioned so that anyone who walked through the front door would see it first. She would have liked you, Ryan said. She would have told me to get a haircut. Ryan laughed. Real laughter. The kind that comes from a body that's healing and a heart that's full. Outside, the neon sign blazed in the darkness. Every letter restored. Every bulb burning. Dawson's Diner. No more flickering. No more dead letters. Just a name, glowing bright on a street that had remembered what it meant to be a community. Gunnar walked to his bike. He threw one leg over the seat and sat there for a moment, looking back through the window. Ryan wiping down the counter. Lily asleep in her booth, one small hand curled around the edge of her apron. Sarah's photograph watching over them from the wall. Bull's kitchen, clean and ready for morning. He pulled out his phone, dialed. It rang once. Hi, Dad. His daughter's voice, 31 years old, living in Michigan, waiting for 4 years and answering on the first ring. Hey, sweetheart, I was thinking maybe I could ride up next weekend, if you're free. I'm free, Dad. I've been free. I know. I'm sorry it took me so long. You're calling now, that's what matters. Gunnar started his engine. The Harley rumbled beneath him, familiar as a heartbeat. He pulled out of the parking lot, turned onto Main Street, and rode past the diner one last time. Through the window, the light was on, the family was whole, and the sign burned bright against the Ohio night. He didn't stop. He didn't need to. Some things you don't need to watch to know they're real. You just need to know they exist. That somewhere behind you, a father is home, a daughter is sleeping, a diner is open, and the people who showed up when it mattered most are still there, still showing up, still proving the one truth that matters more than any other. Family isn't blood. Family is who comes through the door when the lights go out. Family is who stays when the world says leave. Family is an 8-year-old girl with burned hands and a heart bigger than every motorcycle in Ohio, standing on a step stool at 1 a.m, fighting for the only thing she ever loved. And family is the strangers who saw her fighting and refused to let her fight alone. If this story reminded you of someone who showed up for you when nobody else would, drop their name in the comments. They deserve to be remembered. And if you haven't already, subscribe, because stories like this aren't just entertainment. They're proof that the world is still capable of getting it right.